Mae'Govannen. In this edition of the Gentle Musings of an Elven Scholar, today we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart as well, and that is about the Elven concept of time.
You're late.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. Nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.
One of the most difficult things that I see with a lot of people is they feel like they don't have enough time, or they can't forget the past, or they can't stop living only entirely for the future. And so today I'd like to talk a little bit about the Elven concept of what time really is and how in its truest essence it doesn't exist. Also I'd like to cover in this topic something else that I've been hearing from other watchers is about having hope. And so what I'd like to do in this video is to combine both the Elven concept of time and how it really doesn't exist and how we are far more free than we realize, and how that also combines with giving us hope for not only now but for the future, even hope for the past, that we can literally, while we can't change the past, we can change about the way we view it. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. This is going to be a relatively short one, but I've heard from so many people who have lost hope and who harbor so much guilt. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. As always, I usually like to quote from the Silver Elves, and this one is kind of apropos because it depends on how much you want to learn. All right, the elves say the light of truth can penetrate the greatest darkness, but it cannot enter the minds who insist on keeping their eyes closed firmly shut. All right, that is so true. I experience this with a lot of people. They've decided what their dogma is. They've decided what their concept on reality is, their worldview, and they will not step out of it. They won't even debate about it. And I see quite a bit of that. So I like the Silver Elves. I respect what they do, so I like to quote from them from time to time. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so this topic today is based on a scientific paper that I wrote, very easy white paper I wrote some years back about the Elven concept on time and how people misinterpret what time is all about and how we see that in a lot of science fiction and fantasy movies. I'm going to go ahead and give a little background on myself, because this paper that I'm about to read from you is a little bit heady, a little bit mathematical, but there is a reason for it, so I hope you will bear with me in this short little video. Bear with me when I get through the math, because we're going to get through it very quickly. It's just to try to prove a point about what time is. And so a little bit about me. How do I have any qualifications to talk about this? All right, well, I think I may have described this in a past video, but I am probably one of the great king of nerds. When I was about 8 years old, I wrote 2 volumes on astronomy. I was very, very big into science. I wrote volumes on astronomy. That was one of my great passions. The very first star, or planet, of course, usually called the morning star, that I ever saw was, without a surprise here, was Erendil, which is, of course, the Elvish name for Venus. And that was the first I ever viewed through my telescope when I was very, very young, and that influenced me throughout the years. All right, so here I was, about 8 years old, writing 2 volumes on astronomy. I was so big into the mathematics that grew quickly into astrophysics. By the time I was 14 years old, no joke, I built a radio telescope in my backyard. Literally, where other kids were doing other things, I had a radio telescope I had built in my backyard, and I was scanning the universe, and it was an amazing experience for me. Whereas most kids were out by 17 years old dating, I was out at 2 in the morning with a gigantic telescope that I had obtained, and was doing quantum physics, mathematics, and special theory of relativity. So I obviously got very big into it, more than probably most kids my age. 15, 16 years old, I was working on the Lorentz transformation, which is a mathematical formula for computing time dilation. This is based on the special theory of relativity by Einstein. Don't worry, I'm not going to get too much more heady in here. We'll get through it real quickly, and we'll get to the prize at the end, which is a message that I'd like to say. But don't skip, please, in the video, because this actually leads up to it. So the Lorentz transformation, as you'll see in here in just a minute, is a equation that Einstein used from Lorentz to compute time dilation. Time dilation simply means the faster you go, the slower time is relative to an outside observer. So the faster you go, the slower time goes for you. You may not perceive it that way, but an outside observer, someone on the outside, would look at you noticing that time's going slower and slower. And I remember when calculators first came out, they were big old giant things. And I would spend hours calculating this same formula, probably 300-400 times, just plugging in a different variable so I could draw this simple curve, as you'll see here in a minute. All right, so science, for some people, it can be an amazing gift, and for some it can also be a little dangerous, because you can get so much into science that the world becomes extremely black and white. And the world is so much more than black and white. It's so full of color and texture. What science does is really what it did for me. It did show me a lot about what's in the universe, but it also showed me how much I don't know. How much I don't know. Every time I learned something new, it seemed like 10 new questions popped up. So what science really shows us is how little we know about the universe and about ourselves. But also, because I was so much into science, by the time I was 17 years old, I had a moment of satori, or a moment of enlightenment. I was outside like I had been for years. So this is about 9-10 years of studying astronomy and astrophysics and quantum theory. And I'm out there, and I had my telescope out just like normal. I was out there and I was studying and charting, mapping movements of the moons, Jupiter and Saturn, and all these wonderful things that I was doing. And then just all of a sudden, out of the blue, I decided, let's go ahead and turn the telescope and let's go look at Saturn. Because Saturn is very beautiful, and the telescope was large enough, it really brought in some great detail. And it hit me that night. After about 9-10 years of study, I turned the telescope over, looked at Saturn, and it just hit me. All of a sudden, the science wasn't important anymore. All that mattered was the beauty of Saturn. And it hit me at that moment, after almost a decade of study as a child, that I realized that there was more to the universe than what we realized, that there had been, besides the vast beauty that there was a pattern. There was a pattern in it that couldn't have come about all by itself, that it wasn't an accident, that there had to be something greater than myself. And from that moment on, my life changed. I still would go outside at 2 o'clock in the morning and look at the stars, but I left my books, I left my charts behind, and I simply went out there and enjoyed the beauty. And I had an opportunity right after that to go into school for astrophysics, which I had qualified for, and I was very open to it. But the moment had changed for me, and to this day I still love astrophysics. I still love the mathematics and all. But I decided to go into medicine, so I'm a doctor now, and it has been a great gift. Didn't forget the stars. The stars are inherently, I think, important and ingrained in all those of elven nature, and it will always be important to me. So is being a healer. So, okay, let's get started. This won't take very long. We're going to go through a white paper I wrote, and for those that would like it, if they would like, give me their email, and I'm happy to send them a hard copy of this. But this basically starts off with Once Upon a Time. All right, and it says, while this topic may appear a bit heady, I ask you, the reader, to bear with the science for a while, as I will try and explain away one of the last great myths of mortals, and that is of the existence of time. Within the short paper, I will discuss time from both a scientific and an elven or spiritual perspective. One of the great impediments of mortals is their attachment to time as an actual physical entity or presence, like it is something real, that it exists. This holds them back from perceiving the universe as it truly is, one of timeless and singular existence. And unfortunately, I see this all the time. All right, so we're going to go from a scientific point of view. All right. For most of mortals' existence, time has been perceived as the great destroyer, the thief of youth and loved ones, the destroyer of civilizations and cultures. Mountains crumble and seas dry up in his terrible embrace. Pretty poetic for a science paper. Okay, from this perspective comes the concept of a past, present, and future. The past we can remember, and the future is ours to create. And yet, from the perspective of the myth of time, they exist and have substance, hence the popularity of stories delving into the possibility of time travel and the numerous fictions that have arisen from such. Even many of today's scientists still insist on the possibility of time travel and come up with beautiful mathematical fabrications to prove it. Okay, sadly, each of these theorems must rest on yet another variable, unproven but created to justify their universe when time travel can become a reality in an attempt to balance the equation. All right, but no matter how we may want something to exist, no matter how much we may want it to, we cannot use one unproven variable to confirm the proof of another, not without some serious and dangerous pitfalls. In other words, I want time travel to exist, so therefore I have to believe that time exists, but time is not, it does not exist. And so if we try to prove something from something not proven, it ends up with a really big problem. All right. Fortunately for us, a wonderful and bright, far-sighted man chose to look at life from a different angle. His name was Albert Einstein. So many have claimed him a great genius, and truly he was. But from his point of view, he described what he simply was doing was choosing to look at a problem just from a different angle, all right, a different perspective than most others. While most would have looked at the problem from the right, he always chose to look at it from the left. Sometimes that's all brilliance. I've been hearing that word a lot. You're brilliant, or this is brilliant, or blah, blah, blah. Okay, or you're a genius. Really, all it boils down to be brilliant or to be a genius is to simply look at it from a different angle maybe that others didn't bother to look at. It's really all that it matters. All right, okay, maybe that would be the best definition of genius, not the great vault of information we each contain within our brains, but simply the ability to look outside the box. Einstein used to be asked about, someone would bring up and go, "You're such a genius, you know so much," and Einstein would go, "No, actually I don't." He said, "All I learned was how to research, how to go find the information. I don't need to clutter my brain up with all this data." He said, "If I want something, I know where to go look for it. I know where to go look for a book or whatever." In today's era, in the age of the internet, it's even easier. You don't need to clutter your brain up. You just need to know how to research. The cliche is how to Google. All right. Okay. At the young age of 39, he presented his general theory of relativity. From here, and the special theory of relativity, we learn about a most fascinating concept called time dilation. All right. He built his work upon Hendrik Lorentz in utilizing something he developed called the Lorentz transformations, a set of equations used to understand and predict coordinate frames. Don't worry, we're almost through this part. All right. And within space-time. From these equations, Einstein was able to develop the concept more thoroughly with an understanding of time dilation, or the principle that as one's velocity changes in relation to another, that the viewer, the perception of the flow of time would change. So if I'm going really fast, I may not perceive that time is going much slower, but an outside viewer will go, something's happening on that boat or that ship, whatever's on. And for the faster you go, the slower your perception of time goes. Remember, it's the perception. All right. So he showed how we could use the Lorentz transformations. It looks like an incredibly complex formula. It's really very easy. All you do for the variables is you plug in your speed and the speed of light. The rest of it takes care of itself. All right. But you have to go really, really, really fast for the difference to be able to become more apparent, the difference in time between you and the viewer. Okay, and again, as I said, don't worry about the equations. Life is actually much simpler than we give it credit for. As a child, like I said, I've worked this out hundreds of times, let the calculator do most of the work. That's one of the beauties of technology. All right. Okay, and like I said, I was a major geek. Okay, so I worked it out hundreds of times to produce this beautiful curve that shows you the faster you go, the slower time goes. All right, in the end, it's simply this. If our speed increases relative to someone else's, for example, an astronaut in orbit versus a viewer standing on the surface of the Earth, the viewer would notice the astronaut would appear to be experiencing time at a slower rate. This has actually been proven. This actually has been proven, okay, by placing an atomic clock, okay, that has been calibrated with another atomic clock here on Earth, that put the clock with the astronaut And the astronaut went up in space and went round and round and around the Earth a bunch of times and then came back. So in theory, the clock should have been going slower for him because he was going so fast. When they got back, they compared the two clocks, and exactly as Einstein had predicted, this clock was actually behind, had been running slower. So the astronaut truly experienced time at a much slower rate, but he wasn't fast enough for it to become apparent. It took atomic clocks to figure it out. Now, if he'd gone really, really fast, close to the speed of light, it would have become real obvious. Okay, so it showed that this actually could happen. This has some wonderful ramifications. It means that if we can achieve great speeds, and we're talking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles per hour, okay, this thus approaching the speed of light, which is over 300,000 kilometers per hour, okay, so 186,282 miles per second. All right, pretty fast. That's why it only takes 9 minutes for light to get from the sun to here. So when you're looking at the sun, you're actually looking at what it looked like about 9 minutes ago, not what it currently looks like. Kind of heady stuff here too. All right, but if we could approach speeds close to the speed of light, then we would be experiencing time at a much slower rate. So while it might take us 2 months to reach another star at relativistic speeds, meaning the speeds approaching the speed of light, for us it might take 2 months, but back on Earth 100 years might have passed. Okay, well, this might allow us to reach other worlds. It has the immense disadvantage of leaving behind everyone we loved. All right, they would be dust on the Earth before we ever reached our destination. Not something I personally would care to do. All right. Some have postulated that this would mean that if you there's a way to travel into time. Okay, in the future, we could simply go very, very fast, and while time proceeded as normal around us, we would be experiencing at a much slower rate. Okay, and thus, when we exit the time machine, and though we're slow the craft down and get out, we would now be in the future. Problem is that now the future is now our present, and there is no way to go backwards because it's just our perception of time. We're almost through with the science here. Okay, so as we approach the speed of light, time appears, please remember the word appears to slow down. And as the above curve shows that I told you earlier, once we arrive at the speed of light, which is actually theoretically impossible, then time itself would stop. Sometimes scientists have speculated that, therefore, if we go faster than the speed of light, which means everything begins to reverse and we begin to go backwards in time. But of course, that comment makes the assumption that time actually exists. Okay, but please remember what I stated earlier, that in order to justify some theories, they have to make an assumption on other variables that are unproven. And in this case, you're making the assumption that time exists. What was missed was that they were not experiencing the flow of time. This is the most important part here. So we're done with most of the science now. Okay. What was missed was that they were not experiencing the flow of time, but actually simply our perception of what appeared to be the passage of time. Please remember this. You are not experiencing time. You're appearing what appears to be the passage of time when it's actually something else. Okay. In other words, our perception of the interaction with space itself. Okay, or the fabric of the universe. Okay, like I said, this is a bit heady, but we're about done. Okay, so now let's go down another path for just a couple of minutes. Okay, the year was 1964, and Amo Penzias, along with Robert Wilson, were working at the Bell Telephone Laboratory. And I've talked about this before with you guys. All right, the Bell Telephone Company, actually, to uncover the source of a static noise. Okay, remember, 1964, the phone system just had the static noise that went across the lines, and they couldn't find it. And so they were actually contracted to go out and find out what was causing this lack of quality on the phone system, why there was always this little white noise going off. Okay, they were attempting to find a terrestrial, in other words, a source here on Earth. Okay, something that on the Earth was making the racket. What they discovered changed the field of physics. All right, the noise was found to be emanating from space, outside of Earth. This was not an Earth noise. It was from space itself. They found the noise was the background radiation created by the original Big Bang. However you want to look at that, there was a great event that occurred at the beginning of the universe. All right, or their supposition was the original explosion at the start of the universe, or as Eru Iluvatar said, Ea. You can look at it any way you like to. Okay, what was also interesting is that they discovered that the wavelength of this noise was along the hydrogen band. All right, hydrogen is the most abundant particle in the whole universe. It's the simplest, it's the most abundant. And they found that this was the noise from the hydrogen atom that permeated the entire universe. Okay, so, but remember, hydrogen is also one of the main components of water. So this goes back to Tolkien. All right, the reason I find this so important is that Tolkien, as he discussed in the Silmarillion, he stated that the one element on Earth that most greatly holds the original music or echo of the Ainur is contained in water, which so happens to be the one element that contains the original noise or music from the beginning of the universe. I found that pretty interesting. Okay, so it was also later postulated that the universe is increasingly expanding and that we basically live on the surface of the bubble. So as the universe is continuing to expand, which we know is a fact, we basically are living on the surface of the bubble and is expanding out. All right? So with this fact in mind, we also know that the universe is expanding at the speed of light. We're almost there, expanding at the speed of light. Okay, we are pretty much carried along for the ride. But something changes as we increase our speed relative to our surroundings or to that bubble. For example, as apparent as the Lorentz transformation can help make it, time begins to slow down. But why? Okay, the answer is in our perception of the flow of the fabric of space. Because remember, space is flowing, is expanding out at the speed of light. Okay, so imagine it like this, that there is a wind blowing at your back. Okay, while standing still, you feel its pressure and its gentle touch, right? If you begin to move forward, you will notice that the effect lessens. You don't feel it pushing as much. You will feel the push of the wind weakening. As you increase your speed, the pressure continues to drop until finally, when you're moving at the speed of the wind, you no longer feel it. You and the wind are at the same speed. You no longer feel its effect, okay? Therefore, the flow of the fabric of space is very similar to this, except that it has no directions in the three dimensions of space. It simply flows through us in all directions. Since all things in life are vibrational, both our lives and that of space all have a particular frequency. This is also encompassed in the quantum theory of string theory. Okay, all particles of both energy and matter vibrate at particular frequencies. As we speed up, this increases the energy we interact with and alters the manner that the flow has through us. Since our brains are geared to understand our perception of life through these frequencies, the perception itself will then change. Space no longer flows through us at the same rate, and therefore we experience time at a different rate because it's not interacting with us as it would as we are normally standing still. With that said, time does not exist in and of itself, but it is merely our perception of the flow of the fabric of space. The faster we go, the slower the fabric flows, so to speak, flows through us in the lessening of the effect of the passage of time. Again, these effects are not noticeable until you get to speeds approaching the speed of light. So how does this affect us spiritually? And in particular, how does this affect our elven perception of the universe and life itself? And this is my favorite part. Okay, so fortunately, the elven culture has been around a very, very long time. This has given us time to unravel a few more of the mysteries of life and allowed us to change our perspective of life away from superstition. And yes, the belief in time is one of the last great superstitions still remaining. Elves view the universe from the very long-term perspective. We know that time does not exist and that it is up to us how we choose to perceive life and the universe around us. For us, there is no past or future. There is literally only now. Just N-O-W in all capital letters. All that exists is now. If there is no such thing as time, but simply our perception of space flowing through us, then there is no past, there is no future. All that exists is right now. This is it. This is all there is. All right. So there is literally only now. Okay, it is quite impressive to realize that in all of the history of the universe, over the billions and billions of years that have existed, there is still nothing but this moment that exists right here and now. The past is best for memories, and the future is for our dreams. So many folks today and throughout history have planned all of their hopes and dreams on the future, or continue to live in the past in regret. I have so many watchers that have talked to me about how they carry the sadness with them because they still carry the past with them. Okay, they have forgotten that with each moment, all that exists is now. This is a whole new moment. What happened is over. It's gone. You know, I remember I had a discussion with some others many, many years ago about the whole concept of guilt. Guilt has a value. It's very important to us. It's basically a spiritual way of smacking us in the face and saying, hey, okay, you might have done something that wasn't quite on the up and up, that wasn't honest and noble. Okay, so let's change that. All right, so guilt has a wonderful first moment effect of saying, okay, you know what you did wasn't the best thing to do. Now let's go change it. That, in a perfect world, that's what it is. But so many of us won't let go of the guilt, that we hold on to it. And what so many of us are doing is we're punishing ourselves. The universe doesn't punish you. We punish ourselves. We deal out our own karma by attracting those types of situations to us. Remember in past videos I said, whatever is the light within you, or lack thereof, that's what you attract. Okay, karma is based on what we put out in the universe, what we attract. Okay, are we going to put out light and love and gentleness, and that's what we will attract? Or are we going to put out darkness and negativity, and that's what we'll attract? And we will continue to experience darkness and negativity until we let it go. All right, and start showing the light. That doesn't mean not to feel guilty of things that we do, but the guilt is really meant just as a reminder that, hey, okay, let's fix what we did, or let's learn from it. You know, there's a wonderful cliche that you see out on Facebook sometimes. It's great. It says, I never fail. I either succeed or I learn. All right, so you never fail. You just succeed or you learn from it. All right, so this holding on to guilt that I see with so many of my watchers, they talk about this. What you're doing is you're punishing yourself. You're not accepting the fact that you can learn from this and move on. That you that occurred back then in the past, that doesn't have to be you now. Through the grace of Eru, you can change like that. In a moment, you can be a different soul. And Eru does not hold on to the past. All Eru sees is you today, and what is the intent in your heart. It goes on, it says, they have not forgotten that with each moment, all that exists is now. And with each passing moment, they do not live in the now. Every moment that you don't live in the now, you lose yet another moment of life, another moment to cherish and rejoice in the gift of this greatest gift of all, and that's the creation, and that's Arda. What an amazing gift we have for living in this world. All right, so you are the eternal light. All of you are the eternal light of Eru, a child of the stars with the gift of creation within your heart. Do not lose that sense of wonder that you find in the shape of a leaf, or the sweet scent of a baby's breath from a fawn. Let the starlight brighten you as much as the shining sun does in the morning. That leads us up to my final message or topic in this, and that is, again, as we've discussed in the past, the topic of Estel. All right, Estel is both. It's interesting that within the Tolkien writings, there are basically, well, there's several, but the two main Elvish languages were Quenya and Sidari. All right, they varied over the thousands of years, just like Latin and English and many other languages can vary off. Quenya is often considered the Latin of the Elven languages. All right, but it's interesting in this one case, for sure, that the word for hope or trust or faith is Estel, and it's the same in both languages, because it is one of the oldest and most primary words in the universe. All right. In addition to its common meaning, okay, the Elvish word Estel, okay, refers to a quite complex philosophical concept found in Elvish thought. This idea is best understood as trust or faith and the hope that comes from it. Estel refers to the belief that Eru Iluvatar, God, the creator of the universe, is good, and that his designs for his creatures or his children will also be good. All right? Okay. Despite the fact of how many troubles plague us in Arda, in the end we know that Estel, with hope and faith, it will turn out okay. Okay, the Elven King Finrod Felagund explained Estel is an idea that is not defeated by the ways of the world, for it does not come from experience, but from our nature and first being. Okay, if we are inclined as the children of Iluvatar, if we are indeed Eru's children, then he will not suffer himself to be deprived of us, not by any enemy, not even by ourselves. Eru said that there are really only two laws that we surely should abide by. One, the belief that Eru exists, and the second is in Estel, that it will always work out. There, as the old cliche goes, there is always tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow is for hope, the hope that will come to pass. And for many of the Elven nature or Elven culture, we look upon the world very often with a deep, deep sadness in ourselves. Okay, because we see the destruction, we see the hatred, the fear-based that has become so prevalent in this world today. And for many, it's easy to lose hope, that it is so overwhelming. How will it ever be fixed? How will Arda ever be healed? Okay. It will be healed. It will heal one day. You know, even Gandhi said that it may seem for a time that evil will prevail, but sooner or later good does prevail. It does work out. And if we truly are Eruhini, the children of Eru, okay, we know that as Elven we are immortal, that our souls will go on forever, and that we will have an opportunity time after time. Okay, and one more point about Estel. Estel is also connected to the more immediate hope found in the children of Iluvatar, that's us, that keeps us from being overcome by the hardships of Arda Mard. In other words, the world marred, that it has yet to reach its full perfection because of what Morgoth or the darkness, how it imposed itself upon the world and made it imperfect, so to speak. All right, okay, so the Valar refer to the gift of Estel as the ability to appreciate the unmarred, that they can discern, and the marred, that is, the children of Iluvatar can see what is good about Arda in its present state, despite its corruption by Morgoth. Okay, it is Estel that gives us the ability to see the beauty behind the damage or the unhealed. It's a special gift that we were given. So I'm hoping that you all will remember that, because it's said that those who truly cannot find Estel or hope, that their soul is hurt or damaged, and it needs to be healed. All right, so there will come a time when you will remember, when you will find that divine spark within you, and the universe will hold that special place in your life again. It will happen. If you find that it doesn't happen in this lifetime, it will happen in another. But the point is, by Eru's love, the light will come eventually to you once you reawaken to it. Okay, throughout human history, there have been a quest to find again the secret to immortality. It was forgotten so long ago, but I'm going to remind you the most important part of those that want to live forever. Make sure that you choose a life that is worth living forever, that you accomplish something, that you contribute to the universe, that you live a life worth living. All right, so one last thing I wanted to make a comment about, and then we will be done. Okay, for those that can remember who they are and are willing to take that leap of faith and to believe that in the end everything will turn out, you can let go of the past, use it to learn by. That's why this example was said about the Elven culture back in the time that Tolkien, the Tolkien Middle Earth days, so to speak. That it said that the elves didn't have dogma, they didn't have, so to speak, ritual. They had history. So the past for elves is history, not guilt-ridden, not sorrow, so to speak. Well, there is sorrow in it, but not guilt-ridden, but history. We learn from it, and it gives us Estel or hope for the future. All right, so one more thing, and this is a quote by me. Okay, when you have reawakened your elven soul and found true peace in the now, time will have no more effect on you than the flutter of a butterfly's wings on the far side of the world. All right, may all of you have peace and have a most blessed rest of the day. Namaste.
I wish There's always tomorrow for dreams to come true. Believe